He was 58 the night he saw the wreck. Johnny had always told himself he'd seen everything. The glittering premieres, the courtroom ceilings, the nights alone with nothing but the hush of ice in a glass. But he never heard metal scream like that, not up close. It was past midnight when he left the bar on Mulholland Drive. He wasn't drunk, not tonight, just tired. The rain had come sudden and cold, drumming on the windshield like impatient fingers. He liked driving alone at night. The city looked honest then. Neon signs, empty streets, the silence before headlines and cameras tore it all apart come morning. He was half a mile from his gate when he saw the headlights ahead, off the road, tilted at a sick angle, the left side buried in a tangle of cypress and broken fence. He slowed, blinked, thought maybe it was his eyes, playing tricks like they used to in those lost weeks when sleep never came. But the steam was real, ghosting up from the crumpled hood. The shape inside, a man's head pressed against the airbag, motionless, was real too. Johnny pulled over without thinking. Door open, rain on leather boots. His hands felt steady, almost rehearsed, the way he'd fake calm on set when chaos roared behind the camera. He reached the driver's side. Shattered glass glittered on the seat. The man, 30s, maybe younger, dark hair matted with blood, didn't move. His phone was buzzing on the passenger floor, lit up with a name, Emily. Hey, can you hear me? Johnny's voice cracked. He hated that. The man groaned, a low animal sound. Alive then. That was something. Johnny fumbled for the handle, jammed tight. He braced his shoulder, pushed. Metal shrieked. Rain kept falling. Somewhere behind him, another car crawled by, but didn't stop. And in that moment, bent in the rain, knuckles raw on cold steel, Johnny realized he didn't care who saw him like this. Not the paparazzi, not the lawyers, not the ghosts waiting at home. He was here, he was staying, and the night wasn't done with him yet. Johnny braced himself against the car door, boots sinking into the wet grass, shoulder jammed hard under the rim of the half-crushed window. The rain tasted sharp on his lips. The man inside, mid-30s, pale, bleeding above his eyebrow, let out another low groan but didn't open his eyes. Hey, stay with me, all right? Johnny's breath clouded in the cold. He'd done 100 scenes where he dragged someone from a burning wreck, choreographed chaos, foam instead of smoke, an AD screaming cut. The second it looked too real. But this wasn't a scene. There was no director. Just him, this man, and the rush of headlights that sometimes slowed but never stopped. He hooked his fingers under the edge of the window, feeling glass bite into his palm. The metal frame gave an inch, enough for him to wedge in, drag it wider, feel something in his shoulder snap or shift. He ignored it. The smell of leaking fuel stung his nose. You got a name? Johnny asked, his voice too loud in the small space. The man's head lolled, mouth half open, a smear of blood on his teeth. No answer, just the soft hum of the dashboard dying out. For a second, Johnny's mind flickered, back to a winter night in Kentucky, his brother wrapping an old coat around his shoulders, whispering, "Hold on, kid, just hold on." He wondered if anyone had taught this man the same thing. A pair of headlights slid over them. Johnny turned, rain dripping from his hair, hoping the car would stop. It didn't. Just another ghost in a city full of them. He turned back to the man. All right, I'm gonna pull you out now. I don't know your name, but you're not dying here. Not tonight. He reached in, arms under the stranger's shoulders, braced his boots in the mud, and pulled. The man's weight folded against him, heavier than he expected, smelling of blood and rain and something bitter Johnny couldn't name. As he dragged him free of the twisted door, he felt a cold thought wedged deep in his ribs. Saving him might ruin you. He did anyway. Johnny laid him down on the wet grass a few feet from the wreck. The man's head lolled to the side, rain dripping off his brow. In the flicker of passing headlights, Johnny caught the pale blur of a wedding ring on the man's finger, gold, scuffed, too tight on a swollen knuckle. Somewhere behind them, the car hissed like an animal, steam rising where the engines still try to live. He pressed 2 fingers to the man's neck, warm, slow pulse, but steady. Relief flushed through Johnny, so sudden his knees almost buckled. He steadied himself, glancing down the empty road. Still no sirens, no help. Hey, come on, man. Stay with me. He slapped the man's cheek lightly, not enough to hurt, just enough to keep him anchored. The man's eyes fluttered, dark lashes clumped with rain. He tried to speak, but it came out as a broken rasp. Johnny leaned closer, ear to the man's mouth. He caught one word, Emily. Yeah? Emily, your wife? Girlfriend? She's trying to reach you, man. Stay with me, so you can call her back. He reached into his own coat pocket, searching for his phone. Dead. Typical. He looked around. Nothing but trees and that endless stretch of wet asphalt. A memory flashed. The first time Johnny called someone love and meant it. How it felt to promise I'm not going anywhere, and then leave anyway. He shook it off. Now wasn't the time for ghosts. He shrugged out his jacket and tucked it under the man's head, shielding him from the cold mud. The rain felt colder now, needles pricking the back of his neck. Far off, finally, the wail of the siren. Not close yet, but coming. He exhaled, tension melting from his shoulders just long enough for his mind to whisper what he didn't want to hear. This will be in the papers. The cameras will come. They always do. He glanced down at the man, half conscious, lips moving in a silent prayer or apology. Johnny squeezed his shoulder. You'll tell her yourself, Johnny murmured. Whatever you did or didn't do, just stay awake. Behind him, the wreck flickered, a warning in the dark. He didn't know yet. This night would follow him home, and nothing would stay buried. The sirens drew closer, that rising wail tearing holes in the quiet, stitching a new kind of fear under Johnny's skin. He glanced at the wreck again, half expecting it to catch fire the way cars did in cheap movies. But it just hissed, steam curling like breath in the cold. The man's eyes opened, wide this time, brown, flickering. He tried to lift his head, but winced when pain pinned him back to the soaked grass. His lips cracked around a word. Who are you? Johnny almost laughed. He hadn't heard that question in a long time. Usually it was Johnny. Over here, a flash of a camera, someone telling him who they thought he was. Not tonight. Nobody, Johnny said softly. Just someone who didn't keep driving. The man's eyes blinked slow. He seemed to want to say more, but coughed instead. A deep, wet rattle. Johnny pressed a hand to his chest, steadying him like that could help. The sirens were louder now, blue and red lights bleeding through the rain-soaked dark. Emily, the man rasped again. There was pleading in it now, raw panic cracking through the fog in his head. Don't let her see. Johnny leaned closer. Don't let her see what? The man's eyes darted to the wreck. His breath came shallow, the smell of smoke and oil clinging to it. His mouth opened, shut, words half-born and swallowed back down. He grabbed Johnny's wrist with a sudden burst of strength. His grip was cold but desperate. Don't let them take my phone, he gasped. Promise me. Please. Not her. Johnny's pulse skipped. He looked back at the car. The phone, still buzzing, screen cracked but alive. He thought of all the secrets buried in his own messages. The truths that never made it to courtrooms or tabloids, because he'd learned when to burn them. Johnny looked at the man, a stranger, rain streaming down his face, eyes wide with a fear bigger than death. And as the first ambulance lights spilled over the wet road, Johnny realized he'd just agreed to save this man twice. Once from the wreck, and once from the truth waiting in that buzzing phone. And maybe, just maybe, that second rescue would be the one to ruin him. The first paramedic came running up, boots splashing through the grass, radio crackling something Johnny didn't catch. He stepped back as they knelt beside the man, checking his pulse, shining a light in his eyes. The man flinched at the brightness, trying to speak, but the medic hushed him gently. You're okay, sir. Just stay still. Johnny felt the phone in his pocket like a hot stone. He'd grabbed it at the last second, fingers slick with rain and fear. He hadn't planned it. Not really. But the man's words had stuck to him like wet clothes. Don't let them take my phone. The other medic nodded at Johnny. You the one who found him? Yeah. Johnny's voice felt borrowed, unreal. You his friend? Johnny hesitated. The man on the ground looked at him, then, a flicker of something desperate in his eyes. Lie for me, that look said. Johnny swallowed. Yeah, friend. Lucky you were here, the medic said, checking the man's ribs with careful fingers. This road's a graveyard when it rains. Johnny forced a ghost of a smile. Lucky. He'd never felt less lucky. His fingers drummed against the phone in his pocket, each vibration a question he didn't want to answer yet. Emily. Over and over. What was she hoping to hear on the other end? The man's eyes found him again, lips forming the word promise. Johnny gave a tiny nod. He didn't trust his own voice. When the paramedics lifted him onto the stretcher, the man's hand twitched toward Johnny's. Johnny caught it for a second, cold, slick with rain and sweat. Then the medic moved him along, into the open ambulance, doors slamming shut on the only witness to why Johnny was standing here in the dark with another man's secrets humming in his pocket. Blue lights flashed across Johnny's face. Another car slowed. Someone leaned out. A phone camera gleamed like a knife in the night. Johnny Depp. A voice, half curious, half hungry. Johnny turned away. He slipped his hand deeper into his pocket, feeling the weight of the phone and everything it held. He told himself he'd decide what to do with it later. But part of him already knew there'd be no easy way out of this. Not tonight. Not ever. By the time the ambulance's red lights faded down the wet road, Johnny was alone again. Alone, except for the phone in his pocket, buzzing once more like a trapped bee. He pulled it out, turned it over in his palm. Cracked screen, tiny droplets of rain pooling in the splinters. The name flashed up again. Emily. He didn't answer. He couldn't. He should have handed it to the paramedic, let them bag it with the man's wallet and keys. But he hadn't. And that choice, that tiny flicker of impulse, chained him now to a stranger's life in a way he didn't fully understand yet. His car was still idling by the roadside. The driver's door hung open, rain drenching the leather seat. He slipped behind the wheel, closed the door, stared at his own reflection in the rearview. Wet hair stuck to his forehead, eyes darker than he remembered. He thumbed the phone's power button. The lock screen blinked at him. 4 digits. He could guess maybe a birthday, a wedding date. He shouldn't even try. He knew that. He'd told lawyers, fans, the whole damn world, I have nothing to hide. But other people's secrets? He'd learned they could ruin him faster than his own ever did. He set the phone down on the console. Emily buzzed in again. Then a message popped up. Where are you? Then another. Why isn't he answering? Then a third. Who is this? Johnny rubbed a hand over his face. The wipers clicked back and forth, a soft metronome for the chaos curling in his chest. He could drive away, toss the phone in the gutter, pretend he'd never seen it. But he'd look that man in the eyes. He made a promise. Don't let her see. Johnny didn't know what was on that phone. A lie, a lover, a secret big enough to split a marriage wide open. But he knew what it felt like to have your ugliest truth ripped into daylight by someone who never should have touched it. He picked up the phone again. He could hear the echo of his old manager's voice in his head. You always think you're saving someone, John. You're just burying yourself one secret at a time. Outside, the rain finally slowed. But Johnny knew better than to think the storm was over. He pressed the ignition. Headlights cut through the wet dark. He drove. And somewhere behind him, a promise he should never have made kept buzzing and buzzing, refusing to die. The road back to his house felt longer than usual. Every turn seemed sharper, every streetlight harsher. He caught himself checking the rear view like he half expected flashing lights to appear behind him. Sirens, cameras, questions he wasn't ready to answer. He pulled into his driveway just after 2 a.m. The house looked the way it always did when he came home alone. Too big, too quiet, shadows pressed up against every window. He cut the engine but didn't move. The phone lay on the passenger seat, still lit up with Emily's desperate words. Please, please, pick up. He thought of leaving it there, just locking the car and pretending this part of the night never happened. But that promise, don't let them take my phone, felt like a stone in his throat. He couldn't swallow it down. Inside, he dropped his keys on the hall table, boots tracking rainwater across the old wood floors. He flicked on a lamp in the living room, its warm glow catching on a stack of unopened mail, a cold cup of tea from a night he didn't even remember. He sat on the edge of the couch, phone balanced on his knee. He should have called someone. The cops, maybe. The man's family. But he didn't. He couldn't explain it. Maybe it was pride. Maybe it was the way he'd spent decades watching his own truths twisted until they weren't truths at all. The phone buzzed again, a new number this time. Unknown. He let it ring out. Then it vibrated in his palm with a new text. If you have his phone, answer me. Johnny's thumb hovered over the unlocked screen. 4 digits. He tried to guess. Wedding date. The man's birthday? Emily's. Each wrong attempt made the phone shiver in his hands. A cold, blinking warning. He set it down. Rubbed his eyes. Outside, The rain had finally stopped, but the windows still wept slow rivulets. He wondered who the man was when he wasn't half dead in a car. A good husband? A liar? Both. Johnny leaned back into the couch, exhaustion seeping into his bones. He'd saved a man's life tonight, but what if he'd trapped himself in someone else's wreck? Upstairs, the house creaked like an old memory. Johnny closed his eyes and told himself he'd sleep, but the phone kept buzzing on the table beside him. Tiny, relentless ghosts that refused to rest, and in the dark behind his eyelids, he wasn't sure he wanted them to. The house never felt emptier than when he tried to sleep. Johnny lay on the couch, one arm thrown over his eyes, the other dangling off the side, fingertips brushing the phone where it lay on the floor, a cold, buzzing heartbeat that wouldn't let him drift off. At some point, he must have dozed. He saw flashes behind his eyelids, headlights exploding against trees, the man's mouth forming the word Emily, the sound of glass cracking like ice under boots. A memory blurred with the dream, his own mother's voice when he was 13, telling him some things you see, you never tell. He jerked awake when the phone buzzed again, the vibration louder in the silence than any siren ever was. He sat up, bones aching, head pounding. He checked the time, 3:41 a.m. This time a voicemail. He didn't play it right away. He stared at the screen, thumb hesitating. He could feel it, the line he'd already crossed just by taking the damn thing. Listening might drag him deeper, but ignoring it wouldn't wash him clean either. He hit play. A woman's voice, raw and strained, spilled into the quiet room. Please, if someone has this, I'm his wife, Emily. Just tell me if he's alive. Just tell me if he's okay. Please don't hang up on me. Then silence. Johnny sank back, the words echoing in his head like they were meant for him. Please don't hang up. He wondered if the man in the car had heard her voice in his head too, just before the world smashed through his windshield. He could call her back right now. End this. Hand her the truth. Her husband was alive, barely, somewhere under hospital lights and morphine drips. But that other truth, the one buried in this phone, still hummed between his fingers. Don't let her see. Johnny closed his eyes. He pictured her. Maybe she was sitting by a window somewhere, lights off, phone clutched to her chest. Hoping her husband would come stumbling through the door like this was all some bad dream. Maybe she already knew. Maybe she just needed someone else to say it out loud, so she could stop pretending. He stood, padded barefoot to the kitchen, poured a glass of water he didn't drink. He caught his reflection in the dark window. Rain-slick hair, rumpled shirt, a man twice as tired as he looked on any screen. He picked up the phone again. His own phone buzzed too. A text from an unknown number. We need to talk about what you saw tonight. Johnny's pulse thudded in his ears. He set the glass down, untouched. This wasn't just a crash. Not anymore. And dawn was still hours away. The new message sat on Johnny's screen like a bruise he couldn't stop pressing. We need to talk about what you saw tonight. No name. No number he recognized. Just that. A hook sunk deep in his chest. He paced the kitchen floor, barefoot on cold tiles, the old wood creaking under him with every step. He wanted a cigarette, but he'd quit years ago. So instead he flicked the lighter open and shut in his pocket like a nervous tick. He thought about calling the number back. He thought about ignoring it. He thought about the man's hand gripping his wrist by the wreck, blood slick and eyes wide. Don't let her see. He thought about Emily's voice cracking in the voicemail. And he thought about all the times he'd told himself he was done cleaning up other people's messes. His thumb hovered. He texted back instead. Who is this? The reply came before he could draw his next breath. You know who I am. He didn't, but he didn't doubt they knew him. Everyone did, or thought they did. He scrolled back to the man's phone, still locked, screen gone dark now, but not dead. He knew it was wrong, all of it, but the secret begged him to look. Just 4 numbers. The last attempt had almost bricked the phone. One more wrong guess, and it might lock him out for good. Good, he told himself. Let lock. Let stay buried. But his hand moved anyway. He typed 0914. The date on the voicemail. The message had come in just after midnight, September 14th. He hit enter. The phone unlocked. His stomach turned cold. His reflection in the window caught his eye. A man holding someone else's life wide open in his palm. The screen flooded with missed calls, texts, pinned images, photos that made his heart lurch sideways. A woman's face. Not Emily. Smiling. Wine glass lifted. Johnny swiped up. More photos. Hotel hallways, bed sheets, a corner of a child's drawing tacked to a fridge. His throat tightened. He looked away, but the phone burned in his hand. He hadn't come looking for this. He'd come to save a man who should have died. He'd promised a stranger a lie he'd never meant to keep. His own phone buzzed again. Same unknown number. One word. Careful. Johnny's pulse rattled in his ears. He turned off every light in the kitchen. Stood in the dark with two phones in his hand. His own, and the secret that could ruin someone's life. Or maybe his too. Outside, the night pressed against the windows like it wanted in. He couldn't remember how long he stood there, bare feet on cold tile, the hum of the refrigerator the only sound under his pulse. The man's phone rested on the counter now, unlocked, alive with everything Johnny wished he hadn't seen. Photos, messages, videos so ordinary they felt dangerous. A woman's laugh recorded in a bathroom mirror, half-whispered "I miss yous," a calendar reminder for a hotel room in 2 days. And, tucked among them, threads of panic. "I think she knows. Delete everything. Promise me." Johnny pressed his palms to the counter's edge until the wood bit into his skin. He'd saved this man's life, pulled him from metal and fire and rain. But this? Who was he to decide what came next? His own phone glowed where he dropped it beside the sink. Another message from that same unknown number. "You're not part of this. Walk away." He could. He knew that. He could block the number, wipe the man's phone, leave it with the hospital, and let Emily pick through the wreck herself. He owed none of them anything. He barely knew his own friends anymore. Fame had taught him that loyalty was often just another word for damage control. He picked up the man's phone again. His thumb hovered over a text from the other woman. "Call me when you're safe." Johnny thought about the look on that man's face, half broken behind the shattered windshield. The fear, the plea. Don't let her see. He'd seen it, and now it was his too. He turned the phone over, stared at the cracks webbed through the screen. It would be easy to smash it, toss in the fire, lie to Emily if she ever found him. I never saw a thing. But then what? Did he become part of the lie? Part of the same poison he'd spent decades trying to scrape off his own name? His reflection caught him again, a ghost framed in the dark window. He thought about the courtroom years, the headlines that didn't care what was true as long as it sold. He thought about the promises he'd made, to himself, to the version of him that used to believe in rescue without a price. Johnny closed his eyes. He tucked the phone into a drawer by the sink, out of sight but humming there like a living thing. When he turned out the kitchen light, he knew sleep wouldn't come tonight either. Some debts you don't repay with money. Some you carry alone until they rot you from the inside out. Outside, the first blue hints of dawn bled into the black sky. Johnny poured himself a drink he didn't touch. And somewhere in the distance, Emily's voice still waited for an answer he didn't know how to give. By the time the sky turned that soft, indifferent gray of early morning, Johnny still hadn't slept. He drifted between the living room and the kitchen, checking the drawer where he'd hidden the phone like it might crawl out and accuse him in the dark. At 6, he gave up pretending. He showered, let the hot water burn the stiffness from his shoulders, stared at the steam on the mirror until his reflection blurred into something softer. Less guilty. He almost believed it. Coffee helped a little. He stood by the window, mug balanced on his palm, eyes on the rain-slick street outside his gate. His own phone buzzed on the table behind him. He didn't look. He already knew who it was. No name still, just unknown number pulsing like a threat. "You're not part of this. Walk away." He should. He knew that. He told himself that like a prayer, over and over. But prayers only worked for people who believed in redemption. Johnny knew better. He glanced at the hospital bracelet he'd shoved in his pocket the night before. The medic had pressed it into his palm in the chaos as they'd loaded the stranger into the ambulance. Patient ID, Lucas Rayner, 34, married. The name made it real in a way the photos hadn't. Lucas, the man with secrets, who'd handed Johnny one last reckless trust. Don't let her see. And Emily, probably still awake somewhere, phone clutched tight, waiting for news. Maybe she was driving to the hospital right now, rehearsing what she'd say when she saw her husband's face. Or maybe she already knew everything and needed Johnny to lie to her anyway. He sipped his coffee. Bitter. Cold already. He set it down and opened the drawer. The phone stared back up at him. Cracked screen. Tiny heartbeat of betrayal pulsing just beneath the glass. He could call the hospital. Tell them the truth. Lucas Rayner asked me to destroy this. But then his name would drag into it too. Headlines, cheap gossip shows, half-truths twisting into new scars he didn't want to wear. Or he could answer the next call from Emily. Tell her what she wanted, or what she didn't. Maybe both were the same thing. The phone in the drawer vibrated, a single, sharp buzz. One new message. Johnny didn't look right away. He closed the drawer, let it tremble shut like he could hold the secret there just a little longer. Outside, the street lay empty under the first pale sun, but Johnny knew better than to trust quiet mornings. The wreck was still out there, metal twisted in the night, secrets spilled in the dark. And sooner or later, someone was going to come asking why Johnny Depp was the only witness who hadn't walked away. The knock came just after 7. Not loud, polite, like someone trying not to wake the house. But Johnny was already awake. He'd been standing by the window for 20 minutes, trying to decide if he'd answer the next call or let it ring until it died like everything else. He froze, watched the shape on the porch through the warped glass. A woman, early 30s maybe, hair pulled into a loose knot, raincoat clinging damp to her shoulders. She looked like someone who'd been crying for a while, but didn't want anyone to notice. Emily. It had to be. He opened the door before he could talk himself out of it. The morning air hit him. Cold, sharp, clean in a way he didn't deserve. She blinked at him, surprised for half a second. Then her eyes dropped to the ground, like looking straight at him would crack her open. You're him, she said. Her voice was softer than it had been on the voicemail. Almost careful. Johnny Depp. Yeah, he said. He hated how small his voice sounded. She tucked her hands into her coat sleeves, like she needed to hide them. They told me you were the one who found him. Lucas. They said you. She broke off, teeth worrying her bottom lip. I wanted to thank you for not leaving him there. Johnny shifted in the doorway. Part of him wanted to ask why didn't you come sooner. Another part knew how many nights he'd spent standing on doorsteps he couldn't bring himself to knock on. I did what anyone would, he said. Lie. He'd done what he shouldn't. And he'd done more than anyone would. Emily nodded. Her eyes flicked to the driveway, the wet street beyond. Did he say anything? Before the ambulance. The drawer in the kitchen hummed in his mind. The hidden phone, the other woman's photos, the whispered lies he'd promised to bury. He thought about Lucas's cracked lips. The word promise rasped into the rain. Johnny swallowed. Not much, he said. Half-truth. The only kind he still knew how to tell. Emily's shoulders dropped. Relief and dread tangled together. I'm sorry to show up like this. I needed to see who was there for him when I wasn't. The words hit him harder than they should have. He wanted to tell her it wasn't her fault, that she couldn't have known. But he didn't know what she did or didn't know. He didn't know if he was comforting her or lying for a stranger who hadn't earned it. I'm glad you came, he said instead. Another half-truth. Maybe less. Emily's eyes lifted to his. Is there anything I should know? Johnny's heart thudded in his ribs. Behind his ribs, the drawer might as well have been a bomb. He forced himself to meet her gaze. Rain started again. Soft, insistent, like the sky didn't want to let him lie, but knew he would anyway. Not yet, Johnny said, and he wondered if that was mercy, or the first cut in something that would ruin them all. Emily stepped inside before he could decide whether to invite her. She paused just over the threshold, her eyes darting around the hall like she needed proof he really lived like this. Old guitars leaned in corners, half-finished paintings propped on the floor, books stacked like barricades on every table. I'm sorry, she said again, her voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to intrude. I just didn't know where else to go. Johnny watched her hands, fingers trembling, twisting her sleeve hem until it almost tore. He remembered his own mother's hands doing the same thing when the house felt too small for the truth she wouldn't say out loud. You're not intruding, he said. Another lie, but softer than the others. Emily's eyes found the couch, the blanket still crumpled where he'd failed to sleep. She almost smiled at that, a flicker of warmth that faded too fast. They wouldn't tell me much at the hospital, just that he's stable. They wouldn't let me see him yet. She looked at him then, really looked. Did he say anything about how it happened? Why he was out there? Johnny's throat tightened. The phone in the drawer seemed to pulse louder than her voice. He forced himself to stand still, to breathe. He didn't say much, Johnny said. He could taste the lie now, coppery like blood on the tongue. He was out. Shock. The crash hit him hard. Emily nodded like she expected that answer, but hoped for a different one. She took a step closer to the hall table, where his keys lay beside the hospital bracelet. She picked it up, turned it over in her palm. Lucas Rayner. Patient ID. 12:47 a.m. I call him at midnight, she said, voice cracking. He didn't answer. I thought, maybe he was working late again, but he didn't come home. Her eyes met his, raw, red-rimmed, searching for something he couldn't give her without tearing everything open. You saved him, she whispered, and I don't even know why he was out there, or who he was with. Johnny opened his mouth, closed it again. The words he was alone wouldn't come, because they weren't true. Not really. The phone screen flashed behind his eyelids. The other woman's face, a secret pressed into pixels no promise could bury forever. Emily let the bracelet drop back to the table. It landed with a soft click that sounded louder than any shout. Thank you, she said again, softer this time, like a confession she needed to get out before she drowned in her own wondering. He wanted to tell her she deserved better than half-truths, that she deserved better than Lucas, that she deserved better than him. But all he said was, I'm glad I was there. Another lie, or maybe the last true thing he still believed. She didn't leave right away. Maybe she couldn't. Or maybe she felt what Johnny felt too, that stepping back outside meant stepping back into a world that would demand answers neither of them were ready to give. They sat at the kitchen table, 2 mugs between them, his untouched, hers cupped tight in her palms like warmth could fill the space her husband's lies had hollowed out. Johnny watched her study the scratches on the old wood, her thumb tracing a knot in the grain like she was reading some secret message only she could see. He wondered what she'd do if she found the drawer just inches from her knee, the phone humming its ugly truth under thin plywood and old takeout menus. He used to text me when he was working late, Emily said suddenly, her eyes fixed on her reflection in the black swirl of coffee. Every time, even if it was just be home soon. Johnny said nothing. The silence felt like penance. He was good at little lies, she went on, voice steady but soft. Good enough that I believe them. I don't know why I'm telling you this. She glanced up at him. For a moment, he saw the version of her she'd been before last night. Hopeful, soft-edged, blind in that gentle way love makes you. He hated Lucas for that. For making a stranger hold the shards of this woman's trust in a house that wasn't his home. You can tell me, Johnny heard himself say. Stupid. Dangerous. True. Emily almost laughed, a brittle sound that cracked halfway out. Funny, isn't it? You saved him, but I'm the one who feels wrecked. He thought about telling her everything, lifting the drawer, handing her the phone, letting the raw truth out to bleed in daylight. But the promise he'd made, that single desperate plea rasped in the rain, still anchored him to silence. I don't know what to do, Emily whispered. I don't know how to look him in the face when they let me see him. I don't know what he'll say. Johnny leaned forward, elbows on the scarred wood, hands open like he could catch the pieces if she started to break. You don't have to know yet, he said. His voice sounded older than he felt. You just have to breathe. That's enough for now. Her eyes filled but didn't spill. She nodded. A single tear slipped out anyway. Quick, embarrassed, wiped away with the back of her hand. He wanted to hate Lucas for this. For dragging a stranger into his marriage, his crash, his wreck. But when he looked at Emily, all Johnny felt was the dull echo of a promise he'd kept too many times for too many people. Don't tell. Outside, a car rolled past, slow, curious. Maybe press. Maybe nothing. He didn't care. Inside, the drawer buzzed once, soft, insistent, reminding him the wreck wasn't over. It had only just begun. When Emily finally rose to leave, the house felt like it exhaled with her. She stood by the door, keys clenched in her fist like a weapon she didn't trust herself to use. Her eyes were clearer now, but behind them Johnny could see the questions she hadn't dared speak yet, the ones that lived in the space between thank you and why. He wished he could give her something real, but every truth he'd found in that wreck was wired with too much ruin. And part of him, the raw, tired part that still remembered his own nights in courtrooms and tabloid headlines, wanted to believe silence was the kinder thing. I don't know how to repay you, Emily said. Her voice was softer now, stripped of the last apology that didn't belong to her. If you hadn't stopped, I almost didn't, he thought, but didn't say. I almost drove right by and let someone else be the hero. It's okay, he told her instead. Another borrowed kindness. Get some sleep. See him. That's enough. She nodded. She looked like she might hug him, some tired instinct to reach for warmth, even from a stranger who'd drag her life out of the fire and left the worst part hidden in a drawer. But she didn't. Instead, she stepped out onto the porch, rain dampening her hair again, morning light cutting through the last scraps of night behind her. She hesitated at the bottom step. Turn back. If you remember anything he said, will you tell me? Johnny opened his mouth. The promise tangled in his throat, part mercy, part cowardice. The word promise haunted him. How easy it was to make, how heavy it was to keep. I will, he lied. And this time it hurt more than any truth. When she was gone, the door clicked shut like a final warning. He leaned his forehead against the wood, eyes squeezed tight. The house felt wrong now. Every creak too loud, every shadow too honest. He didn't want to look at the kitchen drawer, but he did anyway. It buzzed again. A single pulse that told him Lucas's secrets hadn't died in that crash. They were alive, hungry, waiting for him to decide whose truth they'd ruined first. He pushed away from the door, palms pressed to his eyes until colors burst behind the dark. He needed air, a plan, something more than the guilt chewing holes in him from the inside out. He grabbed his keys, jacket, the hidden phone. He couldn't stay here, not with ghosts rattling drawers and promises leaking through the walls. The road outside was still wet, sky bruised with dawn. He had no idea where he'd go. Only that tonight, he'd save a man's life. But tomorrow, he might have to destroy it, and his own might not be far behind. The city always looked different at dawn, washed out, half-finished, like the stage before the crew came back to dress it up for another show. Johnny drove with the window cracked, the cold air biting at the sweat on his neck. The phone sat in the passenger seat, screen dark but alive, humming its secret like a heartbeat he couldn't shut off. He should have tossed it in the first gutter he passed. He should have turned around, walked back inside, told Emily here, "This is yours." It always was. But he hadn't. He'd driven instead. The only thing he knew how to do when he didn't trust himself to stand still. The streets were mostly empty. A few early delivery trucks, a jogger with her hood up, eyes locked on the wet pavement like it might tell her a better story than the one waiting at home. Johnny wondered what people would say if they saw him like this. No security, no cameras, just a man in an old car with someone else's ghost in his glove box. They'd find a way to twist it. They always did. He pulled into a gas station off the highway, half-lit, the sign flickering between open and nothing. He killed the engine, sat there for a minute, forehead resting against the wheel. In the rear view, his own eyes stared back, cracked, tired, older than they were yesterday. He reached for the phone again. It buzzed the second his fingers touched it, like it knew he was about to do something he couldn't undo. Another message. Same hidden number. "Stop. You don't know what you're doing." He nearly laughed. If only they knew how true that was. He cracked the screen open, thumbs shaking a little as he scrolled through Lucas's messages again. The photos, the dates, the hotel addresses, the name of the woman he'd never met but could almost see in his mind. Perfume lingering in the cracks of a marriage that looked perfect from the outside. He could call her, warn her, tell her Lucas wouldn't make it to the next cheap room under a fake name. But what then? He'd promised a man half dead in his arms. Don't let her see. He could almost hear Emily's voice too. If you remember anything, will you tell me? She deserved the truth. She deserved better than Lucas. But did she deserve to find out like this? From a stranger she'd thanked over cold coffee in a house that wasn't hers. The gas station neon buzzed overhead. A tired kid inside wiped down the counter, never looking up. Johnny turned the phone over in his hand. A small, cracked door to someone else's ruin. In the silence, his own ringtone split the dark. Unknown number. Again. He didn't flinch this time. He answered. A voice, low and coiled with something ugly, slithered through the speaker. "Walk away, Johnny. Or you'll wish you had." Johnny's lips curled around something that felt like a laugh but died before it escaped. He killed the call, dropped the phone in the cup holder. He sat there while the pump next to him clicked, the world rolling on like none of this mattered. But it did. And soon, someone would make sure he remembered exactly how much. He didn't remember paying for the gas, or the taste of burnt coffee he forced down at the grimy station counter. All he knew was that when he stepped back into the dawn, the air felt heavier, like the secrets in his pocket weighed more than the whole city behind him. He got back in the car, hands trembling just enough that he squeezed the wheel tighter, like he could wring the doubt out of his own bones. The threat still hummed in his ear. "Walk away, Johnny, or you'll wish you had." He replayed the voice in his mind. Not Lucas, that much he knew. Lucas was too broken, too desperate, too tangled up in his own mess to snarl at him like that. No, this was someone else. Someone who needed the lie more than Lucas did. He drove with no plan. The sun dragged itself higher behind a smear of clouds, painting the road in dull silver that made his eyes sting. He checked the rear view more than once, half expecting black SUVs or tinted sedans to snake up behind him. But the highway stayed empty. The threat, for now, lived only in his chest. He pulled off near a park, some quiet patch of green that looked like it belonged in another city. He killed the engine, left the phone in the cup holder, just sat, watched a mother push a stroller past a line of oaks, a dog bounding circles in the grass like it didn't know the world was a minefield of secrets. His mind flicked back, courtroom lights too bright, microphones jammed in his face, questions with barbed wire hidden under the politeness. "Mr. Depp, did you know? Why didn't you say anything? Were you protecting him? Or yourself?" He'd promised himself he was done being the man people hid behind. But here he was, knuckles white on the wheel, a stranger's mess rotting in his glove box. A voice inside him whispered, "It's not your fight." Another voice, the one that had pulled Lucas from the twisted metal, whispered, "Yes, it is." His phone buzzed again. Not Lucas's this time. His own. A single line of text from an unknown number. "Your friends can't help you this time." He let ring out. Johnny closed his eyes, head resting against the seat. The morning breeze slipped through the cracked window, soft, harmless, pretending to be kind. "Walk away, or you'll wish you had." He knew threats like this. He'd lived them. But this time, he wasn't sure who he was protecting. Lucas? Emily? Or the last scrap of himself that still believed a promise was worth bleeding for? One thing he did know, when you stand too close to someone else's wreck, you get cut too. And this time, there'd be no clean way out. He didn't remember getting out of the car. One minute he was staring through the windshield at the park. The mother, the dog, the thin hush of normal life pretending to exist. And the next he was standing by the trunk, the cold air biting his neck as he rummaged through old papers and an emergency bag he hadn't touched in years. He found a battered envelope tucked under the spare tire, a name scribbled on the flap that made his gut twist. Mick, an old fixer, a friend once, or something like it, back when Johnny still believed in second chances that didn't come with a price. He dropped into the driver's seat again, envelope in his lap. He knew what he was doing, dragging someone else in, putting fresh fingerprints on a secret that didn't belong to him. But he also knew he couldn't carry it alone. Not this time. Not with a voice hissing threats in the dark. He dialed Mick's number from memory. It hadn't changed in 15 years. It rang twice before a graveled voice answered. No greeting, just a tired sigh that sounded like an old dog waking up. Johnny. Mick didn't ask how he was. Didn't ask why he was calling. That was the thing about men like Mick. They knew the weight of a favor before you even spoke it. "I need you to look at something," Johnny said. He heard the rasp in his own voice, like gravel under tired tires. Not here. Not over the phone. A pause on the other end. A soft chuckle. Still dragging trouble home. Huh? Mick said. "What is it this time? Cops, tabloids, worse." Johnny's eyes flicked to the passenger seat, to the cracked phone that hadn't stopped buzzing since dawn. He pictured Emily's tired eyes, Lucas's broken promise, the strangers watching him from behind blocked numbers. "Worse," Johnny said. He swallowed the rest. "Dangerous. Ugly. Not mine, but mine now." Mick's sigh scratched through the line. "All right. 1 hour. Same old spot." Johnny nodded like Mick could see him. "Yeah, 1 hour." He killed the call. Sat there breathing, fingers drumming on the steering wheel like a heartbeat that wouldn't settle. The phone vibrated again, Lucas's phone this time. A new message flashed through the cracked glass. "We see you." Johnny almost laughed. Good. He wanted them to see. Wanted them to know he wasn't the same man who'd let his name get dragged through the mud without clawing back. He turned the key. The engine shuddered awake. He pulled back onto the road, tires humming over wet asphalt. In the rear view, the park got smaller, just another piece of quiet he'd never get back. Ahead, the old diner waited, the one place left where secrets could be whispered without turning into headlines by morning. Johnny didn't know if this would fix anything, but for the first time since he dragged Lucas out of the wreck, he felt something close to right. If they wanted him silent, they'd have to fight for it. The diner sat on the edge of nowhere, the kind of place that smelled like burnt coffee and old vinyl, and secrets nobody dared keep too long. Johnny parked around back, away from the flickering neon that sputtered open like a half-hearted promise. Inside, Mick was already there. Corner booth, coffee mug steaming between his hands like a peace offering he didn't believe in. His hair had gone grayer since the last time Johnny saw him, but his eyes were the same, sharp, half-tired, half ready to burn the world down if the money was right. Johnny slid into the booth across from him, the cracked phone tucked in his jacket pocket like a live wire. Mick raised an eyebrow. "You look worse than usual." Johnny let out a low laugh. No humor, just exhaustion leaking through cracked lips. "Feels worse than usual." The waitress drifted by, old, hair piled high, pinned behind her ear. She poured Johnny a coffee without asking. Didn't look at Mick twice. They both liked it that way. Mick leaned in, forearms braced on the sticky formica. "Talk to me." Johnny hesitated, the words caught in his throat like barbed wire. He pulled out the phone, set between them, watched Mick's eyes narrow at the cracked screen, the dead battery icon pulsing faintly. He didn't speak for a moment, just pushed the phone closer. "Car crash. Man dying. I pulled him out. He begged me not to show his wife what's in there." Mick's eyebrows lifted just a fraction. "You crack it." Johnny nodded. "Affair. Or something worse. There's another woman. Messages. Threats. And someone's watching. Calling, texting. Telling me to bury it. Or else." Mick's mouth twisted into something like a grin, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You still picking up other people's garbage, Johnny?" Johnny didn't flinch. Felt like the right thing at the time. "Does it still?" He thought of Emily at his kitchen table, her hands trembling around a coffee mug, of Lucas's eyes wide under shattered glass, begging for a promise that never should have been made, of a message in the dark. "We see you." "No," Johnny said. "Not anymore." Mick drummed his fingers on the table, a quiet tattoo that sounded like trouble. "You want me to make this disappear?" Johnny stared at the phone. He didn't know what he wanted, only what he didn't. No more shadows. No more easy silence that turned him into someone else's shield. "I want the truth to mean something," he said finally. The words felt raw, like he'd dug them out his own ribs. "And I don't want to kill her when it comes out." Mick barked a soft laugh. "Truth kills everyone eventually, brother." He picked up the phone, turned it over like a dead thing on a slab. "You sure you want this light on you again?" Johnny's pulse thudded under his collar. He wasn't sure, but he knew what staying quiet would cost. He'd pay that price once. Never again. "Do it clean," Johnny said. "And do it fast." Mick's smile was all teeth now. "All right, old friend. Let's see who thinks they own your silence." Outside, the sun broke through the clouds for the first time all day. Harsh, bright, honest. Johnny didn't look away. They sat for a few more minutes in that cheap coffee shop, the smell of yesterday's grease, and the chatter of strangers that couldn't drown out their silence. Mick was fiddling with the phone in his hands, as if he were weighing how much this piece of truth was worth in dollars, and whether it was worth someone else's fear. "If they're threatening you," Mick muttered, "then someone out there is very afraid that this story will get out. And you, Johnny, you know how it works." Johnny looked up. He saw his reflection in the glass of cold coffee, an exhausted man with more memories than hope in his veins. He vividly described again how he had pulled Lucas out of the car, how he had wheezed and not told her, and how he had promised, not to her, but to himself, that he would no longer be a human shield. "You're going to spill this?" he asked finally. The voice was quiet, but it was even harder. Everything. About her, about him, and about these blackmailing bastards. All at once. Mick nodded fully. "Your name will be in the news, too. Again. Everyone will think you were digging in someone else's dirt for hype." "Let them think what they want," Johnny snapped. "At least I won't be silent." He got up from the table, left a bill on the plastic price tag. More than necessary, less than enough to buy silence. Mick picked up the phone, ran his finger along the cracked glass, as if he had started a mechanism that could never be turned off again. "Give me 2 hours," he said. "When she sees, when everyone sees, you can't just drive off into the sunset anymore." "And you shouldn't," Johnny shrugged. "Sunsets are for those who believe in fairy tales. And I didn't." He left the cafe, the door ringing behind him, cutting off the smell of coffee and old grease. The sun was in his eyes. He wasn't hiding. From anyone. Never again. He stood outside the diner long after Mick disappeared inside to do what he did best. Dig holes deep enough for secrets, then flood them with daylight so no lie could breathe. The cars on the highway slid past, blind to the man on the curb holding his jacket shut against a wind that felt sharper now that he'd chosen to stop hiding. Johnny pulled out his own phone, stared at the screen. Emily's number blinked back at him. Her last text from hours ago, still unread. Did you remember anything? Please. He thought about ignoring it, letting the truth break over her on its own, the way a wave doesn't ask permission before it drowns you. But that felt cowardly. He'd made too many half-promises already. So he called. It rang twice. Her voice came quiet, raw from no sleep and too many unspoken guesses. Johnny. Yeah, he breathed. He hated how small he sounded. You should go see him today. Before it hits the news. Before he tries to twist it first. A silence. Then a breath, jagged. What did he do? Johnny stared at the cracked pavement under his boots. Everything you were afraid of. And more. But you deserve to hear it from him. Not me. Not a stranger. She didn't cry. He could hear her holding her breath, stitching herself together with each shallow inhale. Why are you doing this for me? Johnny closed his eyes. Saw the wreck again. The fire. The broken glass. Lucas's voice rasping promise me. And underneath that, his own face in the window. A man who once begged the world to hear his side of the story and learn the cost of silence the hard way. Because no one did it for me when I needed it, he said. Simple. Final. A door opened on her end. Hospital sounds, footsteps echoing down a corridor he'd never walk himself. Thank you, Johnny, she whispered. I don't know how to. You don't owe me anything. He cut in, gentle but sharp enough to stop the apologies. Just don't lie for him. Not even to yourself. Before she could answer, he ended the call. He let the phone fall into his pocket. Heavy now, but clean in a way secrets never were. The wind cut through him. The sky was too bright, too clear. He almost hated it for pretending it hadn't rained all night on his bones. Inside the diner, Mick's silhouette shifted behind the greasy windows, pulling strings, burning paper, pressing send. Somewhere, an email was already blasting Lucas's truth into inboxes that would never let it die quietly. Johnny turned away. 1 foot on the curb. 1 foot off. He didn't know where he'd go next. He only knew this time he wouldn't look back. He drove until the road forgot his name. Past gas stations that sold bad coffee and plastic souvenirs. Past motels with flickering signs that promised no questions asked and meant every word. The phone stayed silent in his pocket now. No more threats. No more rasped promise me. Just a road and the weight of what he'd finally set free. When the sun dipped low behind a line of battered trees, Johnny pulled over on the shoulder. He stepped out, left the door open, so the car's engine ticked in the cooling air like a tired heartbeat. He watched the sky burn itself orange, pink, then a bruised purple that swallowed the daylight whole. For a moment, he almost reached for a cigarette. But he'd quit years ago, another promise he'd managed to keep. Strange how the little ones lasted longer than the big ones. He thought of Emily. Maybe by now she'd sat at Lucas's bedside, seen the truth in his eyes before the tabloids could twist it first. Maybe she'd hate him for what he'd done, ripping the blindfold off, forcing her to look at the wreck she'd spent years pretending wasn't there. But hate, he learned, was honest. It left fewer scars than lies did. He let the wind carry the thought away. The trees rustled like they knew secrets too, old ones, buried deep in roots that nobody bothered to dig up anymore. He turned back to the car. The road behind him was empty. The road ahead was emptier still. He had no script this time, no cameras, no hungry crowds waiting for him to slip up so they could feed off the pieces. Just him, a man who saved a stranger in the dark and broke the promise that stranger begged him to keep. And for once, he didn't feel sorry for it. He got in, rolled the window down, let the night pour in. As the car pulled away, taillights swallowed by dusk, his voice lingered behind, a whisper for anyone who still cared to listen. Thank you for watching. If you want more raw, untold stories like this, subscribe and turn on notifications. I'll be here, telling it like it is. No promises left to break.